This is episode 79 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And my guest is Janaki Somaiya. And we are going to talk about Yogahood, which is a nonprofit in Melbourne. So let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Stephanie Cunningham, and my guest today is Janaki Somaiya. And Janaki is a board member of Yogahood, and we're going to talk a lot about it. It's a nonprofit that provides yoga classes to people that are underserved. And I believe it's in the Melbourne area. Isn't that correct, Janaki?
That's correct at the moment, yes.
Okay. And we're going to talk a lot about Yogahood and what yoga teachers might want to participate in it for. And then, but Janaki's really very well prepared to talk on this because she is a yoga teacher and she's also a clinical psychologist, in addition to being on the board of Yogahood. And she works predominantly with children and adolescents, both in psychology and in yoga. And she's going to talk a little bit about what the benefits are when you have that kind of background or just yoga in general. So welcome, Janaki. I'm really glad that you were able to come on the show. I really want to talk about Yogahood. I think it sounds like a really interesting kind of endeavor.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here today and to be able to talk more about the wonderful work that Yogahood does. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. What was the impetus? Why did Yogahood start?
So actually our founder, Madeline, would probably be best placed to give us this story because I think it comes very much from her personal experience of how yoga has helped her in her life. And then in particular, when something I think resonates so strongly with any of us, we want to be able to share it with others and make it even bigger and better, and we want to share the benefits with others as well. So from her perspective, she does have her own story about personally why it appealed to her and why she wanted to start Yogahood. And I guess I'm probably better placed to be able to speak to maybe why I have decided to become involved with Yogahood and why I feel so passionate about the cause. So particularly for me, I guess working from a mental health background as a clinical psychologist, and then also growing up in a family where yogic tradition and yogic practice has kind of been around just in terms of Indian culture, being from an Indian background, I've always seen it as, hugely beneficial, particularly for mental health. And the idea of being able to provide yoga to communities in need with also that added element of being able to give back and provide service to others just makes it such a real reason to actually start an organisation like this. And in some ways, I wonder why there aren't more out there. I know there are some that exist, but I think, of course it had to start because yoga's amazing and it should be free for others, actually.
Yeah. So the way I understand it is that Yogahood works with other organizations to provide classes to their clients. Is that correct, or are there other things that you do also?
Yeah, so overall, Yogahood is a non-for-profit. We have partnerships with various organizations. So other yoga studios, for example, and yoga brands might support or might want to give back from the work that they do. So there might be linkages there that help kind of fund what we do and help us run what we do. And then what we actually do is we partner up with organisations, for example, that work in youth mental health, or that work with homeless individuals, or that work in domestic violence, or with people that have experienced trauma, or people from refugee backgrounds, communities in need. And we actually we go out to the organisation's site, and we, with our volunteer teachers, actually provide yoga classes for them. So there's two kind of levels of partnerships that we have, if you want to think of it in that sense. There's the one that we partner with to provide what the service that we'd like to provide, and then there's the partnerships that we start up with more of those organisations that work with communities in need specifically and provide yoga to them.
And are these organizations open to the idea of yoga when you first approach them?
Well, at the moment, in some way, the organisations have actually been coming to us. So there hasn't been, from my understanding, there hasn't been a huge lot of work to go out and the need to actually have to preach and say, you should do yoga. That's never been something that we've ever done. And I don't think it's really the style that we want to have. It's more a bit of an offering. So people will hear about Yogahood from various kinds of sources. I think the biggest one out now at the moment is obviously through social media and through websites and internet. And I think that's where a lot of it starts. So, for example, one of the organisations that I've been teaching with at the moment, which is in youth mental health, was actually looking for services and community activities that can be provided at zero or no cost for young people. And just by looking things up online, they kind of went, oh, we want to reach out to this organisation and see how we can partner with them. So it's actually so far been organisations looking for yoga and then being able to kind of link up with us. But of course, by spreading word through social media about the benefits and sharing research articles, and obviously word of mouth, even through yoga studios. So I actually heard of Yogahood through going to my regular yoga studio and seeing a poster up about them. So that's kind of how it's worked at the moment. So we haven't been going out really preaching or saying you should do this for this reason or anything like that. It's kind of been people coming to us at the moment.
That's nice, isn't it? That they recognize the value of yoga at the beginning. That makes it so much easier, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think that's kind of a bit of service justice to the community that we live in at the moment. I mean, yoga really is a really, really popular thing out there, whether it's people wanting physical exercise or whether people wanting something to support their mental health or their emotional well-being. I almost feel as if the advertising for yoga is kind of already being done to some level. It's more about people becoming aware of the benefits of it therapeutically that I think is probably the next kind of bit that people don't necessarily recognize.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
So what kinds of organization, well, you told me that they're working with the homeless, they're working with children, so it's a very wide spectrum of students that you would have. So I'm making the assumption that you don't do your own teacher training. I mean, you take people that already have a basic or a little more advanced teacher training, and then do you teach them how they go out into these organizations and teach yoga?
Yeah, so we actually we're quite, I guess, strict around the requirements that we have. So first of all, they need to have the basic 200-hour training, all of the yoga teachers, and we also want them to have 50 hours of experience teaching before they can come and volunteer as a teacher. There's always opportunities to volunteer in other ways. So they first need the 200-hour teacher training. They need a minimum of 50 hours of teaching experience themselves. And so what we're wanting is teachers that have had some level of experience before they come to us. And we do run outreach training programs. So it's a 3-day training, which isn't to teach people how to teach yoga because we've got teachers that are already teaching, but it's actually because it is such a different style of teaching when we're going out, it's outreach yoga. So you're not going out into a studio where, you know, there's a music system that you walk in and you just sync your phone with, or there's candles around the room and there's statues and people are coming to yoga because they've chosen to come. You're actually going out into mental health services or community centres, or sometimes, you know, you have to go outside and find a space to practice because there's nothing available. So you don't have the luxury of music and speakers and candles and all of those kinds of things. There's nothing fancy about it. So it's a very, very different environment. So we do run a 3-day, 2.5, 3-day training for anyone who does want to volunteer with us before they can actually go out and teach. And the main focus of that training is actually, first of all, getting them accustomed to the idea of it being a different situation and being a different environment, but then also training them on what kinds of things might come into the room. So it's quite practical, but also there is some theory. But, you know, you'll go out to a school or you'll go out to a mental health service where people don't necessarily choose to be there. They've never done yoga before. You know, they come dressed in tight, skinny jeans and dresses, and they've just come into, you know, a space that totally doesn't look like a yoga space with building works going on outside, and, you know, you're going to try to turn on some music and no one's going to be able to hear it, and all of those kinds of things. One is actually to get our teachers feeling comfortable to deal with whatever they get in the situation. So it's a bit of practical training around that. But then the other aspect of it is also what Yogahood would like is to give back to society, but also give back something that individuals can take away and practice on their own. And actually develop as their self-practice so that they can use yoga as a tool, because in essence that's what we're trying to give them. We're trying to give them a tool to help themselves when needed, or as a regular practice, however they need it. And so we actually don't use music. We don't use, you know, fragrant oils or candles or anything. We try to keep it as basic as possible. We bring mats and we provide mats for them. And then if they participate in our program, they can take the mat away. And the aim is that they just have a mat and they've got their own mat. They can be wherever they are and they can practice yoga without feeling like, oh, I don't have a beautiful space, or I don't have speakers, or I don't have that relaxation playlist, or I don't have, you know, that same fragrance, so I can't induce the same feeling. It's actually just really taking it back to the basics and the core. And that's kind of the stuff that we want to train our teachers to be able to do, because that is ultimately the mission, is to be able to get individuals to be able to practice it as their own personal practice without needing to depend on other sources, especially considering that I guess one of the big reasons that Yogahood is so important to me is because there's, you know, yoga is almost unaffordable for many of these people in disadvantaged communities. And so if they get a chance to experience 6 sessions of yoga and then they can take something away and build in some breathing or some exercises or some asana into their daily routine, that would be fantastic. So we do train them in that.
Okay, that sounds great. Are these teachers volunteering their time when they go out
Yes.
to these? They are. Okay.
Yes.
So it's a volunteer opportunity for them. They do get, though, 2.5, 3 days of training, because it does sound like the environment might be slightly different than what we might all be used to in studios.
Absolutely.
Let's flip it and look at the other side, and you are very qualified to talk to this side of it, which is, what are the benefits? We've seen some benefits for the community, shall we say, and for the teachers, but what are the benefits for the students?
There's a range of benefits. I guess I could talk to kind of general benefits, but I think it would also maybe be nice if you think to move into maybe even some individual experiences or anecdotal kind of statements that I've heard.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good.
Come back with as well. Yeah. So I feel like those are always heart-touching.
Yes.
But I guess overall, I mean, there is so much research out there at the moment that I'm constantly trying to keep up with, and there's always space for more as well. But in terms of, I guess specifically my area of expertise is mental health, and particularly youth mental health. And that has been a bit of a focus of where Yogahood has been partnering, and that a lot of youth mental health services like Headspaces and things like that have been wanting yoga. And I guess there's a lot of research out there that shows that, you know, yoga is beneficial for reducing anxiety and stress levels, whether that's for us or whether it is for people with more severe levels of those disorders. It's also helpful for depression. It's helpful for, if applied in a particular way, it's helpful for things like psychosis or schizophrenia. There's actually quite a bit of research to show that there's cognitive benefits that improve memory just through doing some of the breathing techniques and so forth as well. Some of the benefits, I guess one of the ones that really strikes for me working with youth in particular is that there's, neuroimaging research that shows that after practicing yoga for a certain number of weeks and a certain number of times, it increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, or it increases the growth of the brain region, which is the prefrontal cortex is like that frontal part of the brain. So that's the part of the brain that is involved in making decisions, in regulating ourselves, in planning, decision making, the kind of stuff that you need to be able to slow yourself down, think about, and then choose to make a decision over. And I guess in youth, and particularly in youth with mental health problems, that kind of capacity, I guess I've seen, can be quite restricted or underdeveloped because they've been through various trauma or whatever they've been through, that often they do things impulsively, or, they're feeling really bad. And that's why I believe that, suicidal tendencies and things like that will come up, because they are not able to think of other ways of doing things, or they're not able to slow themselves down or manage their own emotions in order to be able to choose an effective way to respond or deal with a certain level of distress. So actually practicing yoga and moving the body with the breath and all of those fabulous techniques that we have has been shown in research to be actually grow or develop that area of the brain, which I think is essential for this age group and this cohort. So that's definitely a big benefit. But I guess then moving on to my experience as a yoga teacher and the things that I see, because I guess when we see things, it really does strike. And I think what's beautiful about the way that Yogahood runs, and I'm sure, a lot of trauma-informed kind of yoga runs, is that the young people are taught to come in and really try to tune into their own bodies and take control over their own bodies and choose what they feel like they need for that day. So I've had a young male come in who one day will be really, really energetic and participate in all of the movements, decide to make his practice a little bit faster or a little bit stronger, still based on the directions or the instructions that I'm giving, but tailor it to what he needs. And then maybe the next week or the week after, he's come in and literally lay in Shavasana for the whole class and left. And both times actually said that each class was great and he's done something completely different, but he's come in and chosen what he wants for his own body. And so I think, visually or experientially, I think that's a fantastic benefit that he's been able to say, it's okay to do what's okay for my body, and I can feel great no matter what I do, as long as I can listen to my own body. So I think that's a huge, huge benefit. And that benefit can go across through, especially things like eating disorders or body image issues, where we're in a world where we're faced with kind of being told that we need to look a particular way or do something a particular way and listen to others' opinions about how we should be. Yoga is a fantastic tool for just teaching us to listen to ourselves and tune into ourselves. Just really brief kind of anecdotal comments. We do collect feedback and we do evaluate our programs, and some of the anecdotal feedback that we've got is, it's restorative, it's relaxing, it builds my confidence, it's calming, I know how to manage my stress better. I've had another kind of one that comes up as we talk, I guess, is I had a young lady with obsessive compulsive disorder and a whole range of issues, but also had physical tics where her body would move involuntarily. So she felt quite conscious coming into yoga because her body would move involuntarily while we're running the class. And she actually came quite religiously to every class, in that she'd stick to every class and be there perfectly on time and participate in all of the classes. And by the end of 6 weeks, every time she had a tic, she was able to actually just move her hands calmly with her breath and inhale and raise her hands, exhale, lower her hands, and use that to actually regulate herself. And some feedback from her case manager who works with her in mental health was that now, if she's having a bit of a stress out moment in person or over the phone, she's actually able to just practice her breathing and she can actually settle down, and that's reduced her movements quite significantly. So there's a couple of kind of really, really nice stories in there with plenty more, and I'm only just one teacher at Yogahood as well, but there is really a vast amount of benefits working with this cohort.
Yes, and they sound really important benefits too. I mean, all of us that go to
Absolutely.
yoga, love it and we see benefits, but those are really extremely impressive. Do you think that because you are a psychologist and you work with students, individuals who have mental health issues, that I don't know that I would feel really comfortable. Now, obviously, I've not gone through the training, but I have the prerequisites. But how much of the training really goes into some of these kinds of details, or is there always someone else in the room with you that may be able to help if something should occur?
Yeah. So when you say training, do you mean the training that we run?
Yeah,
Or
the
in
ones you
general?
run. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, in essence, you need a lot more training than 3 days to work specifically with mental health disorders and really know the nuances of what is best for what and how to manage particular incidents or things like that. So we will always have a person from the organisation that we work with present. So even though I'm a mental health clinician or a psychologist, when I'm teaching yoga, my role is to teach yoga. Obviously, my psychology background and all of that is running through my mind and it's inherently there, but there will always be a second person in the room with me who is there to manage anything else that comes up, because I can't teach yoga and deal with individual things that come up, as you can imagine. So no matter what, there will always be a second person, or we will always tell the organisation that we need someone from their organisation available. And I think it's comforting for the volunteer teachers. I think it's comforting for the organisation because they know that they've got someone that's used to their processes and all of those kinds of things there. And it's also comforting for the young people or the participants, because one of the things I'll always say is I'll be teaching the yoga and running through the class, but if you need anything, you can go and speak to so-and-so who is from the organisation, so that people don't feel like they're disrupting the class and the class can continue to go on. They can step out quite subtly, have any support that they need, or whatever that is coming up for them can be managed by the organisation itself, and the yoga can continue happening for the other participants. And I think that's extremely important, because we are yoga teachers, and if you're not mental health trained, you're a yoga teacher and you have some background, but we're not trained to deal with crises or particular incidents that come up. And I think, even every organisation has their own processes, and we would have to go through a whole series of training to be able to be aware of those processes if that was to occur as well. So I think it's essential, and I won't run a class, even though I am mental health trained, I actually won't run a class without another person there from the organisation. And I think that's extremely important. In terms of, I guess, everyone who comes in as a volunteer teacher might have different kind of backgrounds. There might be people that do have some more experience with mental health through their work or through other means, and there might be varying levels of awareness and so forth. We do touch on it, obviously, in the training, but like I said, it's never going to be as thorough as being a mental health clinician. So when there are new teachers that are starting out, not because they're no better or they're not experienced, but we will try to have like a bit of a mentoring or a bit of a pairing system. So when I started out as a teacher, I tagged on to someone else, and then she might have taken the lead for the first 3 classes, but I did, the second half or something of those classes, and then we switched over. And that way she was able to give me feedback. I could ask questions and so forth, and feedback to the organisation just to assure that we were all providing a quality of service. And then once I'd had that experience, I felt much more comfortable to kind of go out and work on my own with the organisation. But depending on, if I was working somewhere else that I wasn't familiar with that kind of group and I wanted some support, I would choose to pair up with an existing teacher as well.
Okay, so that's great. So if people really wanted to do this, they are going to have support as well as the students having support. And I think that's really important until you kind of get your feet underneath you and you feel like, I know what's going to happen now, or probably anyway. So that's good to know, because I think it could be a bit making you nervous if you didn't feel that you had some support. So that sounds like a great thing that Yogahood's doing.
Absolutely.
Is there, we'll just go kind of into the future a bit. Is there anything that Yogahood is looking at or wants to achieve or feels there's a need that they might be able to fill?
Well, I think there's a lot of need out there, and I guess obviously all of us who work with Yogahood in various aspects have a really strong belief in the benefits, and a lot of us have personal experiences, I guess, as well, in the benefits of yoga. And again, coming back to that idea of the fact that, yoga is out there, but it's not really accessible to everyone. It's not affordable to everyone. And to me, I guess, obviously working with people that are a little bit more disadvantaged or in need at particular times in their life, it's absolutely, I guess for me, it's imperative that they have access to tools that are going to help them get through these moments. And so, I mean, Yogahood, I think, is filling a big need in that way, but obviously we want to fill even more of that need. And I think there's a huge gap, and there's plenty of services out there in terms of our health system and, psychological services and so forth. And I guess even just working as a psychologist in my experience and doing things like talking therapy quite a bit, I have seen a gap working with my individual clients, saying sometimes there's only a certain point that talking can get you to, or sometimes you need something else. Sometimes you need to get physical. Sometimes people aren't able to sit in a room and talk to someone. Sometimes they can't communicate in the same language as you, and they need to learn to use their own body, or they need movement, or they need to sync their movement with their breath, or they need to do something different. And so I think overall in our mental health system here, there is an over focus on this capacity to be able to talk and communicate really, really well in order to get services. And there's a lack of kind of thinking of other ways of using our own bodies, which is actually the most powerful tool that we have, and actually learning to work with that. And I think that's a really big gap in our system. But I think there's a lot of room to be able to provide that. And it's fantastic that there's a lot of desire or wanting and openness to that from our systems as well. So I think there's a lot more awareness of the need for, kind of more body-based therapies and things like that as well. So, I mean, Yogahood wants to fill that gap because it can see such huge potential for the benefits of yoga. And so our aim is really to reach out to the community and touch as many individuals as we can with this kind of tool. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I just wanted to, you kind of touched on it, but I just wondered if you wanted to expand a bit, because you said in the information that you gave me that both in the psychology and yoga space, you see immense power in combining both of these tools to serve the community. Now, you've just said that some people are not terribly articulate in that they can use their body to kind of help them work through things. So is there anything else that you've seen that makes these two areas work very well together?
Do you mean in terms of my experience through working? Yeah. I guess particularly there's been quite a bit of research and quite a lot of work in the US starting, I guess, but also here in Australia now in this whole trauma-informed approach and trauma-based yoga. And I guess in that way, because there's been so much research and activity around that area, that would probably be the easiest to talk through. And I guess when you think about, so that's thinking about people who have been through trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder or any kind of trauma in their lives, what actually happens to someone who's been through a traumatic experience and is suffering from a traumatic stress disorder is that they're basically stuck living in that situation that occurred however many years ago, and they're unable to break out of that. And so what happens is, walking through the streets today, even though there's no threat around me, because I've been under that threat in the past, I'm walking around perceiving everything that I see as threatening, and I might have certain reactions to that. So I might hear a particular sound and I might hide under cover, or I might get an awful reaction, or when I meet someone and hear a particular voice, I might have a particular reaction to that. So what happens actually is that when you're suffering from one of these disorders, is people are getting stuck in their bodies. And the awareness of their body is kind of gone, because your body is actually in a time that is not currently happening. So people are living in the past, but they're not able to soak up their environment around them and recognize that that's past, And even though they can mentally recognize it, so one of the biggest gaps, or one of the trickiest things, maybe not gaps, but one of the trickiest things is working with trauma. And there's constant battles in mental health about whether should we talk about the trauma, and if we talk about it, is that good because they're getting it off their chest, or actually are we just distressing them all over again and making them relive the trauma all over again? And that's where we get to this point where it's like, hang on, talking about it, they've talked about this a million times, but they're still not recovering what's going on here. And that's where we kind of say, well, their bodies are still stuck. Their mind might have moved ahead, but their bodies are still stuck in the past. And actually what's not happening is they're not grounded in the current environment. If we talk basically, they're not actually grounded with what's around them. And we all know that yoga is a fantastic way of actually increasing awareness of our body in space, increasing awareness of the link between our body, mind, and breath. And so a lot of trauma work is actually moving towards more body-based work, and how we carry ourselves, how we move our body, and how we become familiar with the environment around us and our own body. So even, really simple, just raising your hands as you breathe in and exhaling as you bring your hand back down, that kind of awareness brings you back to the now and away from your body being stuck in the past. So trauma is a big area where there's a lot happening with yoga at the moment. But from my knowledge, there's actually a lot of benefits in various mental health disorders. And I know when we do, basic yoga teacher training, you learn that certain particular postures are opening and they increase your confidence, and certain postures are good for depression and certain postures are good for anxiety. And we know that they're there. I guess the next kind of skill is being able to actually create a package where you're able to deliver the right kind of poses and the right kind of blend for whatever a person is struggling with. And I think that's kind of the next step around that. So I think there's huge benefits to bringing both together. And I think we all, if you think personally, we all benefit sometimes from talking, and sometimes we all benefit from just moving our bodies in a particular way, and being able to have access to both of those rather than being stuck in one particular system I think is really, really important.
Yes, I agree. Well, thank you. That's a very good explanation. I think I am aware that you are offering a Yogahood teacher training to become a volunteer. And if someone was interested in that, is the best thing for them to go to the website?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. So the website has a contact us page, and there's also updated information about dates and things that are coming up. We also have Twitter and Facebook page as well that you can follow if you want kind of more regular updates on what's happening as well. But the website's great. You can feel it's quite straightforward, yeah.
So before we finish the podcast, is there anything that you want to say that we either didn't do in as much depth as you think is important, or something that we just didn't get to?
I mean, I guess we could keep talking for ages, couldn't we?
We could.
But I think there's a couple of things I think that are really important to keep in mind. Is one, we're going out into a community and we're working with people with high needs, and it can, as a volunteer teacher, be quite, like you said, it can be quite anxiety provoking, and we can feel quite nervous about it. It can be quite daunting, and we might actually see things that we're not used to seeing. So see people with particular levels of distress, or people might share parts of their stories, or we might be in an environment that is very different to what we are used to. And one of the most kind of core and important things that I think Yogahood as a volunteer non-for-profit organisation has really fostered and values is that importance of kind of giving back to the volunteers, and the importance of making this sustainable. There's so many of us that want to give out to society and volunteer and run ourselves dry that our whole life might be falling apart, but we want to keep giving. And I think from my experience, that can happen very, very commonly. And I've heard plenty of stories and seen that happen and experienced that happen a lot. And I think for Yogahood to work and be sustainable, there's a strong emphasis, and I think this is really important for people interested to volunteer to know, is that there's a lot of emphasis on looking after yourself and volunteer give back as well. So Yogahood actually runs volunteer wellness sessions quite regularly. So, it's a really lovely experience. So after you might have run a particular program, every couple of months or every term or so, Yogahood will actually hold a wellness session for the volunteers, which could be a massage yoga kind of session or a yin yoga class or a variety of different kind of options, sound healing, any kind of restorative healing activity where the volunteers actually are invited to participate, and just to kind of give back and look after yourself, but also emphasize that. And we really, really value people's personal lives being balanced, and we don't want the volunteer to be overstretching. We actually want it to be, a genuine give back where you actually enjoy giving back and you want to give back because you are feeling well looked after yourself as well. And I think that's one of the best things about Yogahood in terms of keeping it sustainable. So I think that's really important for everyone to learn, but I think it's really important for people volunteering and people interested in volunteering to think about as well.
Oh. No, that's wonderful. That's really great. I'm very impressed with how well you take care of your volunteers, that you're offering mentoring and training and give backs. I think that's really marvelous. So if there's anyone out there that thinks this might be something interesting to look into, the website is www.yogahood.org.au. Their Facebook is yogahood.australia, all caps. Instagram is yogahoodau, all little. Twitter is yogahoodau. So there are lots of ways to kind of find out about Yogahood, see if it might be a really good fit for you. There's going to be a new training. I believe it's in the first part of December. So
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So if you're interested, it might. It sounds like it might be very, very interesting. And I want to thank you, Janaki, for coming on and telling everybody about this. This is a great endeavor. I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed with what you're doing with your volunteers, that you're really taking care of them too. So I want to congratulate Yogahood for doing that kind of assistance, because being a volunteer can be difficult sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. We have to look after ourselves first.
Yes, we do. So thank you so much. It was a great podcast.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.